We have new information about the FBI raid of Rudy Giuliani's home and office on Wednesday. NBC News has learned that federal investigators were seeking evidence linking President Trump's former lawyer to the efforts to fire Marie Yovanovitch. She's the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. She was also a key witness in President Trump's first impeachment trial. Ms. Yovanovitch told Congress that she was the victim of a campaign of lies that led to her abrupt ouster in 2019. As part of the Giuliani probe, the FBI seized evidence, including his electronic devices. Investigators are trying to determine whether his efforts relating to Ukraine may have violated the Foreign Agents Registration Act. No charges have been filed against Mr. Giuliani, and he claims that the search warrant was conducted improperly. NBC national security correspondent Ken Delanian joins us now with more. And Ken, before we dive too deep into the story, I understand we've got something we need to clarify from our earlier reporting. Let's start with that.
Great to be with you, Joshua. That's right. On Friday, NBC News reported that the FBI back in 2019 had warned Rudy Giuliani that he was the target of a Russian influence operation, according to a source familiar with the matter. Well, a second source familiar with the matter is telling us today that that so-called defensive briefing, while prepared, while planned, was not actually delivered. And so we have amended our story to reflect our latest understanding. And the Washington Post, which first reported on this issue, has also made a similar correction. But Joshua, in terms of this new avenue that we're learning about that may be the focus of at least part of this investigation, the question of Rudy Giuliani's efforts to get the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine fired, his successful lobbying efforts to get the president to fire her, this was explored in full, if you'll recall, during President Trump's first impeachment trial. And it was pretty clear that Rudy Giuliani and others wanted her out of the way because she was not on board with his efforts to get the government of Ukraine to investigate Joe and Hunter Biden. Well, now it appears the FBI is looking into whether he did that in part on behalf of a foreign interest, of a Ukrainian oligarch, a foreign government, a foreign actor of any kind. And if he did that and didn't register, that could be illegal, Joshua. But I would caution that that we're getting a little bit of a window into this, but this is an investigation that's been going on a long time. These warrants have been served, and there may be things they're looking at that we have no idea about. This may just be part of it.
Now, Rudy Giuliani claims that the evidence that was seized by the FBI was obtained inappropriately. Here's part of what he said.
The documents they seized, easily half of them involved my representation of the President of the United States as a lawyer. And when I was a prosecutor, when we used to obey the Constitution, you would never do this.
Ken, this does seem unusual to execute a search warrant on a lawyer, especially a lawyer who used to represent a former president.
Joshua, I would say it's unprecedented, except there is a precedent. It's another lawyer for Donald Trump, Michael Cohen, who had a similar situation happening with his office and homes were raided by the FBI, and he went to prison. Now, Rudy Giuliani is right. This does present some issues, but the government has a way of dealing with this. They name a so-called clean team, a taint team, separate from the investigation of FBI agents and lawyers who go through everything, all the material from Rudy Giuliani's electronic devices that were seized, to make sure that none of it is subject to attorney-client privilege and to remove anything that is and make sure that that's not part of the criminal investigation. And Rudy Giuliani's lawyers will get a chance to argue about that in court, as Michael Cohen's lawyers did. But lawyers don't get a free pass from committing crimes just because they have attorney-client privilege. And the government here was able to convince a judge that there was probable cause to believe a crime had been committed and that evidence about that crime was present in those electronic devices at Rudy Giuliani's home and office, Joshua.
Craig Melvin asked President Biden about all this during his interview with the president. Let's listen.
Were you aware of that raid before it happened?
I give him my word I was not. I made a pledge. I would not interfere in any way, order, or try to stop any investigation the Justice Department had underway. I learned about that last night when the rest of the world learned about it. My word. I had no idea this was underway.
Ken, get into the categorical nature with which the president responded to that question. This is about as black and white as Joe Biden gets when he says, "You have my word, I did not know." Why is he that categorical about this?
Well, very simply, Joshua, he has simply restored the post-Watergate norms under which a president does not interfere with the Justice Department on criminal matters. A whole sort of body of rules and regulations developed after Richard Nixon, interfered with the DOJ during Watergate to prevent that from happening again. It's only remarkable because Donald Trump completely set that aside and said rhetorically, how much he interfered is an open question, but said that he had the power to stop criminal investigations, to start criminal investigations. And he sort of trashed this post-Watergate norm. Well, Joe Biden has absolutely restored it. And we have no reason to believe that he's not telling the truth there, that there's no evidence that he played any role or anyone at the White House. And that was true under the Obama administration and the George W. Bush administration, Joshua.
Before I let you go, Ken, I'm going to ask you to repeat yourself just a little bit, because I think that stories involving Rudy Giuliani necessarily have a lot of, fire, a lot of sound and fury that can signify nothing around them just because of his personality and so on. But this is a serious matter. And I don't want this to get caught up in any kind of opinions that people may have about Rudy Giuliani's personality or anything like that. Before I let you go, Ken, just bottom line this for us one more time. As this story goes forward, what should we be paying attention to? What should we be looking out for?
Well, I think we're all getting caught up in this very sort of rather pedestrian and pedantic foreign FARA, the Foreign Lobbying Registration Act, which seems like sort of a technical statute. It's not often enforced. But in this case, it's a huge deal, because if Rudy Giuliani was lobbying the president of the United States on behalf of foreign interests and didn't disclose it, that's arguably a perversion of American democracy. I'm not saying he did that. That's what's being investigated. And it goes well beyond some paperwork violation, some failure to disclose. And also, of course, Joshua, the U.S. intelligence community has made very clear that Rudy Giuliani was right in the middle of a Russian disinformation operation to interfere in the election, because he was taking information from people who were taking information from Russian intelligence. So I think going forward, obviously the investigation will proceed as it will, but I'm watching for the sort of the larger picture to emerge of where this foreign lobbying stuff fits in to other aspects of Giuliani's conduct, Joshua.
A very serious investigation. And again, to reiterate, it is so far still an investigation. He has not been charged with anything, at least not yet. Thank you, Ken. That's NBC national security correspondent Ken Dilanian with the latest.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.